Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to the conversation. So on tonight, we're going to have a special conversation in reference to the state of today's Black man voting, why to vote, who to vote for, and why voting is so important, and why your vote really matters. So this is the real conversation that we're going to have on tonight. Of course, this conversation will be spearheaded by men because it is the state of our men. I want to say hey to Pastor Paul Jakes, who is here. He says, okay, and that he's here. Marcus Jefferson is here, and he says, good evening to Congressman Davis and his brother. So I want to remind you guys to share, and share again, because we're ready to have a real conversation. I'm going to go around really quickly, and I'm just going to ask each and every person to introduce themselves as I give you a brief introduction of them. Starting with Steve Clark. Steve Clark says that he's a professional chiller. Well, I wonder what that means. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. My name is Stephen Clark. I'm currently the chair of the Hopeless People is a Hopeless People Committee for the District of Illinois, and that's Alpha Phi Alpha. As for my profession, I own a state farm agency in Chicago, the Northwest side.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. Well, this next gentleman that comes up on the roster, he says that he is the Iron Chef of the South Side of Chicago. Well, everybody, get your forks out. Let's see how that's going. That's Mr. Don Prophet. Don.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Harvey. Good evening, everyone. My name is Don Prophet. Currently have the honor of serving as the Executive Director for the District of Illinois of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity under the leadership of Brother Dr. Leonard McInnes, who was ill and not able to make it tonight. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm excited to have this conversation tonight with the gentleman on the call. Thank you.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Catherine Jones, who's here. She's saying good evening to each of you. Well, the next up on the roster is that West Side pastor who keeps it real. I mean, we actually call him the real walking pastor 100. That's our very own Pastor Phil Jackson. And he's also a professional chiller. Okay.
Grateful to be here, Dr. Harvey, and as well as with you distinguished gentlemen. I serve as the founder and CEO of the Firehouse Community Arts Center right here in the North Lawndale community on the West Side, mighty West Side.
And we got to say a big shout out to your wife, my very good friend, Kim Jackson, because if I don't give Kim her own shout out.
Exactly.
Well, our next up on the roster is a book enthusiast and movie buff, and that's our very own Michael Gaines. All right, Mike.
Hey, hello, everyone. My name is Michael Gaines. I'm the chair for the Justice Racial Economic Committee for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity for the district and the region. In my professional, I work for the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I do corrections reform. I've actually worked with the congressman several times on reform and actually doing some reentry services in Illinois as the Summit of Hope and also working with GEO. So I'm a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much, Mike. Well, next up on the roster, he says that he loves family and spending time with his son, but most of all, he loves therapy. So shout out to the man who loves a little therapy every now and then. Why don't you introduce yourself, Nick?
Hello, everybody. Shout out to Pastor Phil, the West Side. I think we're the only two holding it down, so shout out to the West Side. My name is Nicholas Hinton. I am I am the former past chaplain of the Romeo Mu chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, the West Side Qs. But in my professional life, I am an assistant principal. I am an educator right here on the West Side of Chicago.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. So next, this gentleman says the pride of his life is being a father, and I simply love it. I didn't call my dad Dad. I called my dad Diddy, and that's Diddy. So I understand. So hats off to you, Vaughn. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Vaughn Rowland. I am the founder of the Bridge Builder Group, which is a consulting firm. By trade, I'm a lobbyist, government affairs consultant as well. But I also hold the chair as for Romeo Mu chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated for our voter education and mobilization. So happy to be here.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Krista Overton, who is here with us just as well. And Marcus says this is a great group of brothers. So to the man who makes this possible for us, to the one who continues to educate us that going forward means unity, that's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Congressman?
Well, I'm just delighted to be a part of this discussion and want to thank all of my fraternity brothers who are on the line, but all of those other individuals who are not necessarily, many people were not privileged who are Black men to join fraternities of this type because they never went to college. They didn't have the wherewithal that allowed them or gave them the privilege of going to college. And if they did, they didn't know it. So, whatever the reasons, they're not a part of this, what we call Divine Nine group. But also, it's good to have the discussion, especially as it relates to this business about voting, but other things as well. One of the reasons I think it's so important for all people is because if other Black African Americans, men, women, whatever, don't vote, I can never obtain what I would have the opportunity to obtain if they did vote. And so I need each one of them, and I need all Black people to vote if we're going to have the influence, the power potential activated that we have. And so I can't get whatever I want if other brothers, sisters are not voting, because my power is linked to their power. My influence is linked to their influence. And so if 25 or 30% are not participating, then that's 25 or 30% of the potential power we could have. So it's really our job and our task to get everybody else to participate the same way that we do. And I end, a woman named Miss Beattie King was my teacher all through, well, kindergarten up to high school. And she used to tell us that a wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. And then she'd say, the less he spoke, the more he heard. And I want you boys to be like that wise old bird. And so I'm going to be just like that bird and listen to everything that everybody's got to say. And thank you all so very much for being a part.
Well, outstanding. So, like I shared before, this is a meal conversation. So, I'm going to pop off and I'm going to let Mike and Don start this conversation, and you guys take it away.
Mike, go right ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm excited about this election. I've already early voted. I gathered up all of the divine men in Springfield, Illinois to do early voting. We did bros to the polls, trying to make sure we get brothers out and vote. And I've been out there canvassing. I am excited about this because I'm ready for the change. I'm ready for to see a Black woman take the lead of this nation. I don't know where the idea of some folks talking about that Black men or men are not going to vote for. All the men I know are voting for. All the men that I've spoken to are excited about this. Black women have always been up front. They've been our first educators. My mom was a Black woman. So she was the first one to teach me. She was the first one to guide me, and I've had teachers, I've had staff, I've had bosses, all have been women and Black women. So they've always been up front and lead. And as Black men, we need to continue to support them just the same way that they support us. There's no way I could have gone or made it the way I have made it without my sister, without my mother, without my wife. All have been Black women who have been pushing me up front. And sometimes they don't push me. Sometimes I got to put them up front and I got to let them lead, because sometimes they can work out a plan better than I can. So I'm like really excited about this election. I'm really excited about Black men stepping up forward. And I think sometimes people got the concept too that, you know what, she's in this by herself. She's not. She has to put a team around her. And that is a key part about leadership. It's not just you leading, but it's the people that you surround yourself with to bring the best ideas, to bring the best notions, to bring the best things for this country.
I appreciate and I agree with everything you said. I'm from a single mother household. The two most influential women in my life were my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother I love more than air. So I think when it comes to the structure of life and learning my manners and being respectable, I think a lot of that came from the two most influential women in my life. I think that the notion of you can't put a woman in office because a woman cannot lead, I've been hearing a lot of that. But I have to look at what is the option, and if I have to if you have to look at qualifications and you have to look at credentials, and you have to look at resume, who has the most decorated resume that's most qualified for the position between the two primary candidates? Who has the most and who's had more success close to the role? I'm not going to sit here and disparage or tear down one candidate. However, I just have to look at the qualifications. I have to look at what happened. And I have to look at the one, you have to look, I don't know, someone was fired from their job. The people spoke. The people spoke.
Yeah.
And if you're fired for your job, you're typically fired for a certain reason. So to reapply and say, I deserve that job, nothing was stated as to why. So I have to look at the qualifications. I have to look at, and what have you done in your term as to where you are right now, So I'm really, I'm excited also. You have some individuals, there are some politicians that you kind of question their offenses, how authentic they are. But, I get a sense of which candidate can connect more to the people, which candidate can connect more to an ordinary everyday Joe like myself. And I think that I hear that loudly or more resounding from one particular candidate. So I'm hoping that there is a lot of change, because we've had some, this administration was a complete difference from the previous administration. So I'm looking forward to the dialogue on it. I'm not going to monopolize the time right now, but I understand what you're saying as far as the excitement is concerned, and as far as what Black women have to bring to the table, and respecting and acknowledging that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I echo the sentiments for sure, with regards to the level of impact Black women specifically have played in my life, and I'm sure in all of our lives, right? And very similar to Michael, Romeo Mew has participated and engaged with Stroll to the Polls, Divine Nine efforts last weekend, and we saw hundreds of people early voting, right? So hundreds of Black people early voting at Olive Harvey on the South Side. And I think that speaks volumes to how excited people are to be a part of this historic moment, potentially, right? But it also speaks to how people are just not going to sit down and take things that seem to be forced upon them, and they want their voices heard. And I think that is an extremely important power that we all possess in this so-called democracy that we live under. So extremely excited, extremely excited about being here on this call, having this conversation with other Black men, intellectuals that are looking to sort of break this thing down and I think push back a bit against some of the notions that Black men are not in support. I'm not trying to support a particular candidate, but I am supporting VP Harris. But I think it's important for us to have these conversations. So thank you.
I'm with you. I've already voted. I got a lot of my staff already voting early, taking folks to the polls with me, checking in with neighbors. But there's some young men I serve and that I work with that are like feel that black men, from their own experience, from their own challenges, like, and I've been long hours talking to these cats about the validity of their vote and the significance of their voice in the midst of that. And it comes from a different place. It doesn't come from really a lot of political depth. It comes from, I don't count anyway when it comes to the daily progress. My link card just dropped. It comes from daily grind and stuff. What will this matter on the ground? In my conversation, it means a lot, right? I said, really, what you have to understand is you don't work for the government. The government works for you. And this is how you make the government work. You put in that work to stand your ground. Hey, I need more. I need to do this. Because you just, my nudge to them, you can't just wait for the vote to then have a voice. You need to, the next day after the vote, you need to go downtown to City Hall, get a group of people. We need this for our particular services and our rental situation or whatever, and stand your ground in this space to make the government work for you. Because in some way they feel like I think they work for the government. Well, this is as good as it's going to get. And so that's a little discouraging, but we're trying to nudge these cats to see it in a different way. One young man I met with the other day, we had a little gathering, a group of men. We were talking about voting and the significance of their voice. And I believe he got it. I was talking to him about the reality of how not only just the legacy of people who died before you, right? For your behind to get up and vote to make a difference, and the legacy that you're saying to them about the validity of their sacrifice. But the reality of your grandchildren, your children are going to be affected. You got 2 boys; they're going to be affected by. And he started thinking like, "Oh, I need to think." That was a tipping point right there. And I think it's been the conversation to help cats to awaken themselves to that in that space. We got to keep fighting. For
You make a real valid point when you talk about individuals with those kind of attitudes. So, I'd like to ask, how do we prevent those attitudes from happening? How do we keep individuals from coming up with that kind of thinking? I mean, I'd like to hear, if I could, some reaction to that.
I think one aspect is that we continue to educate. I think we do great when it comes to voter registration. I think it's like I've been out there.
We don't even have that anymore.
But I think what we still been doing, or sometimes lacking, is on voter education.
We're hearing.
Yeah,
We're
talking
just
about
not seeing.
Yeah, talking about what their platforms are, who you voting for, and not just the presidential election. We got to talk about the local elections, because a lot of people get time, I'm going to vote during a presidential election, but then forget 6 months from now, you got a bunch of local elections that are about to happen that makes more impact on your life than even a presidential election. A couple of years ago, I did a voter registration. Actually, with the Sigmas, Alphas and Sigmas got together. We did a huge voter registration out in the downtown, mostly Black area of Springfield. And I remember I was trying to get this guy to register to vote, and he was like, "Well, I got a conviction. I can't vote." I'm like, "In Illinois, you can." We still have this misconcept of folks who think because I have a conviction that I can't vote. And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna vote." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let me get you registered." He says, "I'm voting for Donald Trump." I'm like, "Okay, just curious why." He says, "Because I was locked up, and he gave me a pardon free." I was like, "No, he didn't give you a pardon free. COVID gave you a pardon free." It was in the midst of the COVID times. It was a midst when prisons had to dump individuals out of the prison because they were trying to stop the spread. And then I pulled up my phone. I said, "Look, this is what was going on. This was what came that every prison was doing." He was like, "Oh." And I said, "And let me show you what Donald Trump was trying to cut back. He was trying to cut back the Second Chance Act. He was trying to cut back some of this reform stuff." And he was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And it was that dialogue, that education, that one-on-one that we had. And we have to not be so quick to, let's get somebody registered to vote. I got them registered to vote, and just move on. We got to sit time to talk to people, talk to them about platforms, talk to them about candidates. Even if we don't agree who they're voting for, let's just talk about the platforms. Let me see what you know, and let me show you what I know. And then let's get real education 2 on it. Let's get some facts, because one thing we know when we saw debates, they don't like fact checking, or they don't like fact checking at all. When you start fact checking, it get a little nervous, little curry. But we have to fact check, because you can see the commercials, and I'm like, okay, that ain't true. That ain't true.
And
like, how you gonna cut all
and
these
you're
taxes?
so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every time I hear that, I cringe, because I led the effort to have people in the penitentiary considered, and they got stimulus checks.
Exactly.
Trump and his administration were against giving individuals in prison stimulus checks. They said they didn't need it because they had a place to live. If they got sick, they had doctors to treat them, and they had food if they got hungry. That they did not need a stimulus check because they were taken care of. And the Congressional Black Caucus, with me at the lead, were the ones who pushed hard, even went to court. That's how they got money. Went and a group of lawyers sued the administration, and the administration then had to give these individuals stimulus money while they were even incarcerated. But yeah, knowing certainly becomes a big factor in terms of what individuals think.
And then he tried
circulating money, that group of individuals who are close to corrections and activity, been to prison, do the street piece, that's a common response from them, because they believe that Trump was the reason they got economic stimulus checks during COVID.
I would like to add on to what Brother Mike was saying about just voter education, and not just voter education. I mean, we need to break this cycle in general, right? Because we're doing this now. We'll be doing it at this rate. We'll be doing this again in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You know, if you look at the Illinois readiness, it's called the Illinois, make sure I get this right, Illinois Assessment of Readiness for our Black students when it comes to language arts and math. I mean, just for language arts alone, only 14% of Black students in third grade are meeting or exceeding the expectation, right? So that's a third grader that's already behind. You compare that with white and Asian students, both white and Asian students respectively are over 40%. So when we talk about equity, equality, and even going, we talk about civics education, we are starting way behind. So these kids typically grow up to be 18-year-olds and furthermore adults that are just miseducated, misinformed, and in some cases don't feel hope or feel like they apply. So, I do think that a long-term approach, of course, right, we still need to do things in the short term, but a long-term approach, we need to really find ways to emphasize early childhood education within our households, right? Congressman Davis, you don't come home with me at night and telling me to make sure that my child is studying or, making sure he understands a concept in school. That is our responsibility as parents, and especially as fathers. That's something I take very serious. And, we have to break this cycle. And I do think it starts at home. So I wanted to make sure anytime I get to talk, especially with Black men, I love to bring that up because, that's not talked about enough of how, our children are doing when it comes to early childhood education and how it impacts voter education and voter turnout within our community.
Yeah, and I add one thing to that too when we're on that education piece, right? Obviously, I think, we need more education as a whole, like you said, around voter turnout, voter education, et cetera. But when you look at breaking down how policies and legislations impact everyday people, I think that's something that gets lost, right? Just as Rep. Davis just spoke to, when you think about, or just Project 2025, for instance, right, where they're looking to gut the Department of Education, and now looking at how, many of us, I'm sure, were educated in some form of public institution at some point in our lives, and then thinking about how that would look and how that would impact us, or would have impacted us in our trajectory to where we are today without having some of those resources, right? So I think that's a very important piece as well, is just sort of breaking down in layman's terms, if you will, how these policies impact everyday people, and what that looks like for them. Because oftentimes, once we get past the election day, folks lose sight, like, all right, I did my job, right? And now, you've got an omnibus bill going through and stuff is getting put into in form of legislation, into language that people are not even understanding and seeing that's what's happening, right? So I think there needs to be more discussions about how we can make this very convoluted legislative process and language more dissectable for everyday people.
Let me thank both of you for the point that you just made, because one of our goals and one of the things that Democrats hope to have happen after we win all three of these elections on Tuesday is to make early childhood education available to every child in the United States of America.
Yes.
That's a goal of ours. It's a goal of mine. And obviously, I also serve on the committee that has a great deal to do with the money to make things happen. But early childhood education is essential, again, because we're leaving millions of children behind. Most of us, I mean, we've obviously arrived at, middle class designation in our society. We do all right. We do pretty well, although we're always looking for more and better. But we're leaving millions of children behind. For example, almost half the children that live in my congressional district live with someone other than their natural parents. Most people don't know that. Most people are not aware of that. Therefore, they're not putting as much emphasis on these children who are left out of the economic environment where they got a real shot at emerging and going up. So early childhood education is absolutely essential. And I thank both of you for raising that issue.
Well, outstanding, simply outstanding. I popped back in just to share a few questions with you. Well, Karen Wormley Castleberry is here, and she says, we need to go back to basics and teach civics. Many adults are not aware of simple civics. Marcus Jefferson says, first recommendations is a new app that all 48 million African Americans can connect on and receive real data and in real time, and the Divine Nine can fund this new app. All right, Linda Johnson is here, and she says, share with the men in my family. Catherine Jones is here, and she says, that's why we reach out for early childhood. Linda Johnson also says, let's share with additional family members. Catherine Jones is giving the big thumbs up and saying, yeah. Linda Johnson then says that's true, especially grandparents. Once again, civics is a very important to have in our schools and in our high schools. We have first, we've been joined by two of our additional guests. That's Pastor Cy Fields, who actually kind of thinks he's kind of cool too. And we also have one of our local urban business owners who is here with us just as well, and that's Brick Johnson. But we have a anonymous question. And the anonymous question says, does our vote really count? Does it really matter when you look at this electoral college and how that rolls out? Who wants to attack that?
Yeah.
Well, don't all attack it at one time.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I would say most definitely it matters. It doesn't just matter just as in one vote matters, but it matters as almost that as a collective as we matter, as in what we're speaking for and what our voice is, and what is stuff we want to impact. Your voice matter even when it comes to electoral college, because if one thing they look at is what the electoral college does and what the popular vote is. And sometimes when that don't match, we got a whole lot of more questions and know that we have a whole lot of more fighting to do when it comes to things. But your vote does matter. For the last 15 years, I have been running Alpha Day at the Capitol, bringing our members to the Capitol in Springfield to actually to do some legislative lobbying, pushing, and looking at things in our community. And in the last 5 years, we actually been bringing youth with us so they could see that process. It's one thing to teach youth about the process, but it's another thing for let them to see the process when they're going through the Capitol. And you have to understand, we have youth all around Illinois who's never been to Springfield, that's never been in their state capital, and know that, you know what, some of these laws and policies and procedures has to do with your everyday life, from the day that you're in school to the day that you get out. And that, you know, one thing that I always thought about is that maybe we should start talking about voter registration or about civic duty, not when somebody turn 18, but really when they're 12, when they're 13, when they're 14, about that this is their process. But also making sure that we hit those college campuses. I love that we talked about early learning, early starting, but one of the biggest things that I've been trying to push is making sure that college students vote all year round, not just doing a presidential election and go back home, but you might want to really register in the community where your school at, because you're there 9 months out of the year. The same person who's a legislator in your school is also making policy and procedures around you. And when we're talking about, you know, one of the big things that I hate to say that the Republican Party has basically almost blocked is loan forgiveness. We know the impact that loan forgiveness will have on our communities. We know we have individuals who can't make that minimum thing because they still paying off student loans. And we're talking about hundreds and thousands of student loans to get a degree, to get a master's, to get a doctorate. And then some of us might be paying off for life for almost 20 years. But we also know that if we have, and there are student loan forgiveness programs, but if we could really intricate that into part of the education, it will do an economic boom. Because if you're not paying on student loans, you're ready to what? Buy a house. You're ready to buy a new car. You're ready to start a family. You're ready to invest that money that you're paying off in student loans. So yeah, your vote does.
It definitely. Oh,
If I can.
And so from every vantage point, history is so good to know, because there have been instances where one vote, just one vote almost put Black folks back in slavery.
Yes, sir.
With the election of 1876. I won't go through and explain it, but anybody can read about it. But that one vote elected the guy who became president, and he pulled the troops out of the South and gave the South back in control of the former slave owners. And they concocted the whole arrangement that created the governance of the South all the way up almost to this day. One vote. It's called the contested election of 1876. Just one vote. One vote made Winston Churchill the Prime Minister of England. So people can read up on that one vote business and find out that there are instances. The Black community is in a position right now in Chicago and Cook County because we did not vote in the primary election, and we're electing, in essence, somebody to be state's attorney that we do not want but is still going to become the state's attorney because she won the Democratic primary. Because Black people in Chicago and Cook County did not vote. And because we did not vote, the person who won the election is not the person that we thought should have won, who was a Black fellow whose positions is very different than the positions of the winner, who is going to be the Cook County State's Attorney. And of course, that's our fault. As the song said, if I die and my soul be lost, ain't nobody's fault but my own. Well, that's our fault. We didn't vote in the primary.
If I can add, thank you, Congressman, because you're so right. One vote has changed, history in our country many times. And we know that this presidential election is very consequential to democracy and a lot of other things, whether it be protecting the interests of white nationalists or things of that nature. Where this is a presidential election, it's important because, as you're mentioning, Congressman, it matters what happens locally, right? Our big focus, of course, is on the presidential election, but on the local level, our daily life is impacted. Our family's future is impacted by how we vote. And so, yes, it is important that we vote. Yes, there's presidential, but as the Congressman mentioned, there are many things that happen on the local level that would impact our lives maybe a lot quicker than what happens on the presidential federal level. On the local level, it determines the courts, how your money is spent, things of this nature that impacts our family literally every day. And so to those who are wondering, it doesn't matter because there's going to be millions and millions of people voting nationwide. Well, your vote not only counts nationwide, but there's also your vote for local, what's happening in your local jurisdiction, in your local town, local city. So yes, every vote does count. And I hope that for those who feel disenfranchised and things of that nature will feel, amen, the necessity for themselves and their family's future to make sure that they do vote.
Outstanding. Well, we have a couple more questions for you or a statement. Jennifer Maddox is here and she says, I'm listening in on the live and I am in the area of Woodlawn and Greater Grand Crossing. All of the schools here are performing below grade level. So I'm reading hers now because you brought up the local stuff, Pastor Si, so I love it. She says, all of these schools are performing below grade level and no hope in sight. One school can't do after school programming because of funding. And they have close to 700 students. So they have close to 700 students. Also vacancies for teachers. I need and wish we could get people that are in position to hopefully do something to help our schools. It is sad and frustrating. This has been going on for such a long time. We need to elect a president. Hopefully we all will. So thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that. Now there's a gentleman by the name, want to say hey to Tyrena Newkirk, who is here with us just as well. Want to say hey and a big shout out to the NAACP who is here listening and viewing with us also. We have another question from someone named Quad, and Quad has a question directly for Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, Quad says, wow, is that Brick off Madison on a live stream? Brick, you vote? Man, if you're voting, I guess I have to vote too. Well, I know Brick is going to answer those questions and talk about the fact that he is voting, but I'm going to share a little bit about Brick just as well. Brick has been voting and making sure that he uses his power to vote. Brick, you can unmute yourself, or let me see if I can help you on this side. Unmute. Okay. Because there you go. Because good. Even in Quad's statement, he brought up that you were an ex-offender, and he was shocked that you can vote. So as one of our staples in our community who's a business owner, why don't you share that you vote?
Yes, I vote, and I love voting. I get all my friends and family members to vote. That's what I talk about every day. a chance to move forward. This is it. This is a real serious time in our life that we need to vote. We're not going back. I need them with me, and I got a lot of them going with me tomorrow to vote. I'm going to take them myself. And I tell my friends, hey, man, if we can listen to our mothers, we can listen to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
All our mothers is strong women. If they can raise us, we can follow a woman. I believe in that. I believe that she's the right person for this time.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to get behind her with all my friends and everybody that I can reach out to. And we're going to push this agenda. I'm looking forward to that each and every day. I talked about this. Never before have I ever talked about an election like I talk about this one. I
Right on.
love the fact that we got somebody that understands what we're going through today. I'm a businessman. I've been in business for the last 30 years. And I see a chance to go forward with it. With the other person, I'm not even concerned about it. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm only thinking about forward. I'm not thinking about backwards.
That's right.
So we're gonna put our best foot forward. I'm gonna keep the spirit high, and we're gonna get this did.
Well, to Quad, who sent that
Can-
message, Brick says he's taking people to vote tomorrow. So why don't you meet him tomorrow and go vote with him, and then go over to Brick's business that evening for Monday Night Football, and you'll be okay. So why don't you join
Right.
Brick, meet him on Madison right in front of his place of business if you want to go and vote, and he will make sure that you can get where you need to get to vote. Marcus is here, and he says second recommendation is to ask President Kamala Harris to add to her agenda for Black America to direct her new Treasury Secretary to award $120 billion to create new SBA direct loans for Blacks. Catherine Jones says, amen to what Mr. Johnson was talking about. Shrugs is here and says, good evening. That's a way you need parents to get involved with the schools to help the children. Dr. David Miller is here and he says, where's the link to join? David, I'll send it to you. Give me just 1 second. Linda Johnson says, you're right, Brick. I have been taking family members to the polls as well as just like back in the day. Outstanding. Well, Nicholas, how important is it that you explain this to your students at school?
So first of all, thank you. I just want to take an opportunity. First of all, each and every one of you are some men of valor, but most importantly, I love the conversation. I was that wise a while right now because I'm just listening. But two things out here, right, is leadership and community. Leadership and community is echoed through the voice and the fabric of each and every one of everything that you're saying. Omega Psi Phi in this particular district, it talks about the talented 10th. And what the talented 10th is that W.E.B. Du Bois coined this to simply say that he emphasized that the necessity for higher education is merely found in developing the leadership capacity of the most able 10% of African Americans. And the beautiful thing about that is that we have that within this space. And I think that if we talk about moving forward, right, I think that it has to be in the fabric of that leadership and that community. Brother Brick, I know you don't know me, but I've heard great stories about you and your businesses, and you just being a staple, as my auntie said, in the community, and your businesses on Madison Street, and us finding new ways of forging into opening up your space to talk to people about the business model, right? Different ways that we can do it in the classrooms. I am an educator, and I know we talked a little bit about, those numbers and those troubling numbers of students and getting proficiency towards college. And as we talked about, the rates, but also I think that in the midst of that, we must talk about community, because not only are we leaders, right? But can you imagine if we had these conversations once a month and we all went our separate ways and got our communities and our blocks behind us, and we educated them and we grew this thing until we had men, and women of every of every block and every neighborhood coming together and having that leadership and building that community. One thing I want to add about the word community, right? When I look at it and when I think about it, Pastor Phil, I look at the church and I think that that oftentimes schools are a microcosm. It's like a microscope of the communities, right? Because whatever happened in the communities is generally happening in schools. But also when we look at the church, we see that what's happening in the communities also what's happening within the church. And for some time, right, a generation was lost, right? A generation was lost to some extent, because even now I show up to community meetings, I go to church, and you see the babies there, but they out of obligations. But you see the older saints, right? And I'm hearing the numbers that's just troubling, that pastors are leaving the church every day because of stress. But not only that, there is a generation of folks, our wise and our witty folks, who are passing and who are transitioning, and there's no one left to take that take the realm. And so when we think about the generation, right, when we think about Generation X and we think about the millennials, which I am a millennial, and we think about that, if you look at this call, we have you brothers who are wise, and then you have myself and Brother Vaughn, who are like the millennials, and there's that gap in between us, right? And there also are some that's under us. And I think that if we look at leadership and if we look at community, and the only way that we can forward is by educating everybody, educate our community, right? Going back and reaching for those people from the church, right? Going back in our community, taking those leadership models and going back and reaching back to those children, having those classes for the GEDs, having those classes for parents. And, one of the things that as you asked, let me ask the question. I answer the question now is I inform my students that it is important to vote because your voice is important. Most students come to the building every day with their mind already made up that they will not be heard. Most students walk in the building not just knowing that their voice will not be heard, but they come with trauma. And so their minds are not regulated enough to even get to the space to where they can learn. So in order to help students regulate, in order to help students learn, I think that if we step onto those two, we already got to figure out leadership and community. And if we can really hold on to those things, and as I tell my kids every day, even at the democratic process that we have in our building, we elect student voice. We have a student voice community. We have students come to us and be like, man, Mr. Henn, we should do this for Halloween every year. I said, well, when are you going to step up and have your voice? And so again, I want to leave with the sentiments of letting us hear leadership and community. And if we get back to those things, and if we hold on to those things, I think that moving forward, as we are in this election and as we are moving forward, I think that we got I think that we can really do this thing.
Yeah, I think, Brother Nick, you hit it on the head. You hit it on the head. When I think about this, I think about elections and communities are built on addition, not subtraction, right? So oftentimes people feel like there's no space for them. When you talk about young folks, they don't feel like there's a space for them in these conversations, right? So we need to be pouring into them. We need to be sitting at the tables where they are, reaching back, reaching down, reaching over, reaching up, to ensure that these conversations are being had with those young people to say, hey, what is it that you care about? We'll say, hey, this is how this impacts you. How can you be involved? Hey, if you want to pass out some flyers, you want to, work on sign-up sheets, anything, right? Be a part of it. Be a part of the movement. And I think that's something that's extremely important. Now, also, just to add this tidbit, and I'll pass the mic, I think this is something that VP Harris I think she struggled with it early on. When you start to think about social media and things of that nature. But I think towards now, getting on that last track, I think she's starting to figure it out that, she needed to be a bit more strategic with how she engaged Black men specifically. And then from there, I think it's on us, right, to be able to say, hey, she's highlighting things in terms of entrepreneurship for African-American men that will impact you, young businessman, right? That may be a Gen Zer or Generation Y, whatever it may be. Also looking to legalize marijuana at the federal level is something obviously that we've done here in the state of Illinois. But in terms of you're thinking about recidivism, you're thinking about how that's impacted African-American, you're thinking about African-Americans building economic power. That's just another stream for that. So being able to highlight some of those things for our young people to call out that may be something that may impact them is something that I think is extremely important. And thinking about that tie-in back to how this election will impact them and how we can build that community and leadership.
Let me
If
add
I
this
can
very
add a
small
point,
piece. I'm sorry, this very small piece. Not only did Brother Stephen talk about the proportionate of only 14% of students in African American schools hitting the Illinois assessment of readiness, which is the standard, which is the IAR test, is simply for guiding students to that trajectory towards college and being ready for college. So the IAR is simply the projection of where the student will fall and if they're making those marks. But not only that, another troubling statistic is that when I look at my block and I look at the community, and I live in Austin, and I see there's an alarming number of grandmothers who are losing their homes with their grandkids in there and losing their homes to taxes, right? Because they don't have the money or they don't have the financial understanding or the financial literacy to hold on to those. So that's another thing that, just to go along with what Stephen's saying, is to think about that in ways too.
and yeah, if I can just, I think, and pardon me if I don't get the names right, I think Brother Hinton was mentioned about the church and the faith community. I think one of the things that's at a challenge, and you're right, in some ways, some sectors, many churches and faith communities are finding this challenge, a very serious challenge in post-COVID, and sort of maintaining its membership, the life that it used to have, things of that nature, membership. But I really believe that although many churches are doing some great things, I think there's a part we have to get back to civil rights kind of strategy just a little bit, where we have community conversations. We in the faith community have to have conversations outside of our congregations and the congregational walls, and have communications and conversations with the community, whereby the faith community and the community at large can be joined together to know what's going on, right? To be locally impactive in the place where we live, in the place where we worship. And those conversations are necessary. That includes talking to the young people, talking to the elders and seniors, and finding out what's happening, and in the ways in which the church can be a resource and be a partner with the community in helping grow the community and address these things that are happening within the community. And I also think that I think it was Brother Brick, somebody mentioned earlier. Not only, but I think that even as we're on the brink of this big election, I would encourage us who know a brother, right, who know a man who may be feeling disenfranchised and feel like, Kamala Harris, just because she's a woman, is not fit. I think we need to have conversations with those brothers, right, and especially those who think that the other side has their interests. We got to be very clear. I think some brothers once they see the clear picture, that in the big picture, for many, Trump is just protecting white privilege. He's protecting, want to whitewash black and brown political and economic power, right? And and those are things that, of course, should be interest to our brothers, amen, but they don't see that. I understand disenfranchised or opinion they may have with the Democratic Party or whatever, or even just with the gender of Kamala Harris. But the big picture is to protect, whitewash history, protect protect white privilege, and whitewash black and brown political and economic power. And I think we talk to brothers on that level. Maybe they understand that there's a need to push back against that with their vote. And I think that's a way that the faith community ongoing can engage men and brothers to be involved. But we can't make changes and come together. We don't first have a conversation.
Pastor Fields, I agree with
I
everything
see
you
we,
just. I agree with
yeah, I
everything you just
certainly
stated.
agree. I
Yeah.
also want to interject that Dr. David Miller has joined us, and not only is he an outstanding dentist and will take care of you without hurting you, but he's also served as a state representative and ran for a statewide office. And David, we're delighted to see you, and thanks for joining.
It's great to be here, Congressman Davis. For those who don't know, the Miller family, even though we grew up in Evanston, my dad was social agency director of Beacon Neighborhood House at 1440 South Ashland. Before that, Costco was there. Many of you probably weren't born. I'll say rude to the bros on this call here. Congressman Davis knows quite a bit. I can agree with what I was hearing earlier, 200%. And a lot of times I like to say that, we go to church on Sunday but we don't forget the good book in the Bible on Monday. Our words and inspiration just don't end on Sunday. They go to Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday. And yeah, sometimes we get down with, every day I go in the dental office, I don't feel good. I'm sure all our pastors and community leaders don't every day feel 100%, but that don't mean they just quit. They just don't mean they don't give up. They just don't mean they just don't do their best. And most importantly, that doesn't mean they don't vote. I went to Boston University, and most folks don't know Martin Luther King got his theology degree at Boston University.
Yeah.
And so the Black church has been always beyond the Black church. It has been the leader of social change. It's been the leader against discrimination. It's been the leader for women's rights. It's been the leader of us being considered full citizens in this United States of America. And so, plain and simple, I will never vote for a racist. And that's usually the bottom line. I don't care how good my economics are or my neighbor's economics, but if we're a racist, we're always going to be considered second tier. And for a racist, they will never get over the hump that I didn't replace some white person in getting in dental school, or my sons didn't replace a person getting into Howard or University of Pennsylvania, or my wife didn't just walk into her public office. We had to work for it. And 9 times out of 10, we had to work harder. And so for us as Black men, I'm a little more stern. I joked earlier saying, if you thought Obamas were hard, you should have met my daddy. Oh, better yet, you should have met my mom. And she would have had some harsh words for those brothers. Even though, we want to be sensitive to them, we want to care about their issues. The mere fact that we've been always at the lowest end of the totem pole is reality. And the other side, with their racism, isn't going to make it better for us. Or even if it does make better, we're going to be at the end of the line, even though we are better. And so I just want to say, the last point I want to make is just dealing with health disparities when we talk about public policies and such. COVID exposed a lot of health disparities in the Black community.
Yes, sir.
And particularly since it's Black men here, we have higher cardiovascular disease than white men. We have higher diabetes than white men. We have worse oral health than white men. And it's not just because of economics. And it's not just because of red. And most importantly, it's not because we don't care. It's access to care. It's having make sure there's a pipeline of physicians that are our color, that understand our communities and us as Black men, that we don't like to go to the dentist or the physician till it falls off, or till it hurts. That's just sort of the way men are, and I know the way I am. And so it's us with Obamacare, it's us with Affordable Care Act, it's us to try to make sure that we as Black men are healthy, because that does impact the economy. If I am sick, that health cost translates to all of us, even though, where I'm at. If there's brothers and sisters that are not healthy, then they can't go to work. If their children are not healthy, then someone's got to take them to the physician. That may mean we have to go out of work, leave from work, or somebody's got to take them there. So it's all impacting an economy. And for us to make sure that we stand up for our brothers, no matter where they go up and down, in our lives, that we are here to help them. Vice President and soon to be President Harris is here to help them. He can understand. And the last thing I'll say, I sound like a Baptist preacher today. The last thing I say is that George Wallace said something was real interesting. I thought I heard. He said, out of the 2 candidates, who do you think will come and shake your hand? Trump or Harris? And I know what Harris would do, because she's done it. Not just to me, to my son, to my wife, to our friends when we've met her. White, Black, and different. And so that to me says a lot about the character of a person, about where they really going to matter to us, and most importantly, do they have the spiritual integrity and character to lead this nation forward.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm so glad you say that, because I think sometimes we forget about how folks see us. He told us in the beginning where we fit in, our Black jobs, which means we only can get a certain category, which means we can only fit in a certain box. They're gonna steal your black jobs. What is my black job? There are only certain jobs that are just for me only. Is there only certain places that I can work at? He told us in the beginning who he thought we were. And we need to hear when folks tell us the first time, when they show you who they are, believe them. Believe them.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that you're saying something that Dr. Miller said, that Reverend Pastor Field said. I want to address a few things Pastor Field said, but to address whatever the theme right now, I need you. I'm sure you brothers already know when it comes to educating people that are like, I can't vote for her because of whatever. We have to educate our brothers as to the phrase "Make America Great Again." What does that mean? Is that the slavery America? Is that the America that promoted Jim Crow? Is that the America that promoted redlining and racial profiling? And when you hear "Make America Great Again," that rejuvenates something in certain individuals. That sparks something in certain individuals. That brings hope to certain individuals, and that it has emboldened certain individuals. The title was said on here earlier about white nationalism, and white nationalism is a PC way to say it, but I think that the term "Make America Great Again," that kind of spells it all. So Pastor Phil said something earlier about us having communications and getting together, and I'm all for getting together. I'm all for the communications plural. I think one thing I want to make sure that we do not do, I hope we can continue the conversations, even after Tuesday, because Tuesday is not the end. Tuesday would just be the beginning, either way it goes. One thing I know that we do a lot in our communities, we'll have a big rally about something and there's no follow up or follow through. And I think that if we get together and have the conversation, there needs to be some kind of follow up. What do we do here? If we want to educate our youth, it can't be a one-time workshop. It has to be a multiple thing. It has to be a multiple array of trainings, plural, and conversations, plural, and how do we move over to the next step, and what are our steps, and how do we get from point A to point B? Okay, we're almost at point B, and then we're gonna have to get to C. What do we do? So I would encourage us, after this chat, whether we exchange information, but I would love for us as pillars in our community, just to continue conversations, just to either way it goes on Tuesdays, continue conversations, because Tuesday isn't the end. It's just the beginning of where we need to be.
Well,
okay. I want to interject real quick for my Aunt Nikki and just kind of read some of the comments. Miss Tina Hammond just notified Alderman David Moore as well as Anton Sills. Miss Linda Johnson said, yes, engaging with community in which the church is located, not being afraid to outreach in the area where you worship. It's important. Miss Skaggs gave us some applause. Pastor Jackson of the Firehouse focused, had been trying to keep young people connected to the church with his ministry. Know that we appreciate you. So big ups to Pastor Phil Jackson. Yes, we need to stay connected to educate. And last but not least, Brother Marcus D. Jefferson said, third recommendation is for the President Harris to be sure that every single federal contract and purchase must have a minimum of 15% participation by Black businesses.
I want to say something because I run into, by me being a nightclub owner, I talk to a lot of brothers and sisters. And the thing they talk about with me the most, Brick, why are you voting so hard for Kamala Harris? The Democrats ain't did this, the Democrats ain't did that. I tell them, the reason I'm voting for Kamala Harris is because we need her at this time in our life. But they talk about Donald Trump did this for us. He gave us a check. Donald Trump didn't give us no check. Congress gave us that check, first of all. And I try to explain to them all the time that Congress didn't give them any, Donald Trump didn't give them no check. Congress gave them a check. And they need to get off that thing talking about when Donald Trump was in office, they had money. Y'all ain't had nothing. Donald Trump ain't did nothing to help y'all. He didn't do nothing while he was in the office. That was Obama economy. That wasn't none of his.
Right. You need to tell them, look,
want to-
when y'all was at the club, y'all wasn't spending none of that Trump money because y'all was holding it back.
No, they
Well,
spent
I
a little
think we
money
need to
during that
learn.
time because they had a little stimulus check.
Right.
They came and they parlayed. They really thought that they were doing something because Donald Trump was giving them a check because he signed his name on
Yeah.
on the check and sent it
Sign
out
the
and
same.
all that. But I have to explain that that's the biggest thing I run into when I'm talking about this voting thing.
And I see that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think when it comes to folks on the ground, when I mean on the ground, the folks who are just trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, that's the lowest hanging fruit they're gonna grab to. And more conversation like this on the ground, at a school, at bricks, to be able to say, here's this chart over here, here's this chart over here, even after the the fifth, but being able to kind of awaken our people to that reality. Education in that space, as well as just practical engagement with real politicians. Like Danny's all over the place, congressmen all over the place. More of that to happen, to awaken our people, man, to awaken our people.
I do want to add something to what Brick mentioned. Brick said how, because I can hear this a lot too, where they say, what have Democrats done? Just one thing that is easy, low-hanging fruit. Trey's Future and the National Urban League received a $20 million grant for a registered apprenticeship program specifically for underrepresented minorities in those fields. Who is one of those people? Black people, right? When it comes to apprenticeships, there are exams where you have to pass a math test and you have to hit certain levels. So again, I just want to bring that back to the education piece, to how, as our Black students, where they are, there's money out there, and there's money in these grants that are going to these places, but we need to prepare our kids and prepare our teenagers, and they need to be prepared to accept these programs that are out here. So that's just one thing that happened under the Biden-Harris administration, is that National Urban League and Trey's Future received $20 million block grants specifically to get underrepresented communities in those trades.
But there are so many things that the Democrats have done, and a lot of people don't really know. They haven't done what they should have done, but they did do Social Security.
Yes, sir.
And if our seniors didn't get Social Security checks, they'd be starving to death.
Mm-hmm.
They did do Medicare and
Mm-hmm.
Medicaid. If they hadn't done Medicare, the folks who got to be 65 and didn't have no money and no other insurance, they'd all be out at the cemetery, going to the graveyard every day, because they wouldn't have any way to pay for health care or to go to a hospital if they were sick, or a community health center if they were sick and didn't have any money. All of that is Democrats. Hadn't been for Democrats, there wouldn't be no unemployment compensation.
Yep.
All of that. And so individuals just don't know enough in many instances. There's no perfection. But Lord, trying to compare the Democrats with the Republicans, Lord have mercy. If you don't know, you just don't know.
Nope.
And so government can provide all kinds of things for people, but people have to also provide some things for themselves.
Yes, sir.
That's why my daddy used to tell us that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, that you got to drink deep. Otherwise, shallow drinking intoxicates the brain. And so this business of learning and knowing also helps a great deal. And so I don't expect Kamala to be able to wage a magic wand.
Right.
No, she won't be able to do that. But if we put all the thoughts that you've articulated, all the thinking that you have done, and as somebody said, connect even after the election is over. we're going to have some tough times around public education in Chicago.
Right.
That is a big issue right now facing Chicago. The mayor's budget is a big issue in Chicago facing us as we go beyond this election. Trying to hold on to a black mayor for the next round of things is going to be a tough issue for us in Chicago, not related even to who wins the election for president. So sticking together and continuing to have these kind of discussions are going to be very important. And trying to put a focus on African American men and children and boys is going to require a lot of action on our part. So I don't know if our time is running out or not. I suspect that it probably is. I don't see Nikki, but let me thank all of us for being a part of this discussion and for being willing to take part of your Sunday evening to be engaged, although I think it's about the most important thing we could possibly do. But I think we should do. Nikki, if our time is up or not, I don't know.
You have
I
4
see
minutes. You got 4 minutes.
Congressman Davis,
All right, 2 minutes, and whatever.
You have 4.
Four
I just want
people
to thank
take
you very
those minutes.
I just want to say thank you very much for setting this up, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity just to engage in this conversation, and I'm hoping that we can do a lot more of it, just for the advancement of our communities and working together to just for the advancement of our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Dr. Harvey.
What I'm going to ask real quick is, as I go around the table, everyone has 15 seconds to give us a statement that you would want everyone to remember. And I'm going to start with Mr. Rowland. Von Rowland, go right ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for putting this together. This, I think, was a very impactful conversation, and that I hope that can continue, as many of the men on this call have stated. But just remember, there's a lot at stake on this upcoming election. A lot at stake. All of those various social programs and social resources that Congressman Davis spoke to are things that a Trump administration would cut. Every single last one of those things are things that a Trump administration would look to cut, along with any sorts of DEI contributions from institutions, corporate or education. So just keep these things in mind as we have these conversations with friends and family and just folks that we encounter on the street, and let them know what's at stake, and let them know how their voices can be heard at the local level and at the national level. So thank you again.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. I'm going to park you for one moment. All right, Mr. Prophet, what do you want the public to remember? We have a number of thousands of people watching, so tell us, what would you want them to remember?
Thousands of people on purpose now. No, I'm joking, but I think, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much. And I do believe Tuesday, I want to encourage individuals, if you can do it early, but Tuesday, make your voice heard. I believe in, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity has a program called Voteless People is a Hopeless People. And Brother Clark, I don't mean to steal the thunder, but the sentiment is true. A voteless people is a hopeless people. Senator L.G. Sims, who is a past regional vice president for our fraternity, always says that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So it's very important that you get involved. It's very important that your voice is heard. It's very important that you have a say in what happens for yourself, for your family, for your community. So please make sure that your voice is heard. Again, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity. Thank you.
Outstanding, Don. And you know what? I'm going to add to that. And LG often laughs when I do this. He's right. If you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And just because you're on the menu, it doesn't mean that you're going to be chosen if you're not voting. Nicholas Hinton, your until. What do you want everybody to know?
Once again, thank you all for this space. I think that one thing that I just want to leave us with in thought. Last year, I haven't researched the most current numbers, but last year Chicago had the 5th largest economy in the world. The 5th, let me say that one more time, the 5th largest economy in the world, bigger than countries, bigger than continents as a combined, but the 5th largest economy where money and transactions are done and money is spent. We have to find a way through leadership and through community to make it happen. But most and last but not least, your vote matters. Your voice matters. We're all here to listen, whether you're voting or whatever it may be, through leadership and community. Let us continue to make our voice matter.
Outstanding. Mr. Clark, what do you want to leave the people with?
Again, thank you for having me. I want to say vote. Make sure you vote. The one thing I want you to walk away here with, someone in the comments was talking about the Small Business Administration. Under the Biden-Harris administration, SBA more than doubled. I want to say that again, more than doubled the number, value, and share of its major loans to Black-owned businesses since 2020. That providing $1.3 billion in support, and that's in fiscal year 2023. Imagine what we can do when we have a Black woman in office. This idea that Trump is your savior or cares about you is a farce. The man is a salesman, snake oil salesman, has been his whole entire life. So, get out and vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. She is our best hope for the future. Thank you.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Mike, Mr. Gaines, what do you want to leave the people with?
I want to let them know I voted. I voted for Kamala Harris. I'm asking you to vote for Kamala Harris too as well. I'm asking that as Black men, we show them that we can vote. They have us on the news for everything else. Everything else. Let's show them how we support our sister. Let's show them how we support our community. Let's go out there and vote.
Outstanding. Well, Pastor Phil, what do you want to leave the people with?
I just want to say bad officials are elected by good citizens who don't vote. We got to get out there and do our work, man. And we got to support people who don't understand the issues because they're looking at a paycheck to paycheck kind of lifestyle, but yet their paychecks are affected by the lack of that knowledge and voting the wrong way, man. The bullet or the ballot. We got to make this work.
Outstanding. Pastor Seyfield, what do you want to leave the people with?
Real quick, I just want people to remember God is good. Yes,
sir.
He's good all the time. Encourage 3 people to get out and vote. Don't vote for a racist, and tell somebody you love them because it might be your last opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Well, Mr. Johnson, what would you like to leave the people with?
I want to say thank you, Nikki, Congressman Davis, and the rest of you brothers. I enjoyed talking to y'all. And we're going to get out and vote, and we're going to make the thing happen. A woman good enough to bring us here is a woman good enough to lead us. And we're going with that, and we're going to stand on that. I'm voting for Congressman Harris, and all my friends are going to vote as well.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Dr. David Miller.
Well, one thing I want to go back to just real quickly what Congressman Davis, and thank you, and honestly, Brick had said about what people say. The legislative process is offense and defense, unlike this team I'm kind of wearing today. They didn't do so well. But student loan debt, wiping out student loan and debt. Most African-American students have more debt than white students, period. Why? Because we don't have generational wealth. We don't have mommy and daddy on that school to get them in, and so on and so forth. That's number one that the Democrats have pushed. Capping insulin cost, okay, for our seniors. Vice President Harris, soon to be President Harris, talked about she's going to go after other medications, including with Big Pharma, to make sure the cost of medications, so folks don't have to decide between their, paying their food or paying their medicine. And the last thing is the public education. You've got folks that Trump in his last administration didn't believe in public education, talked about voucher systems. Even Tim Scott today was talking about that, school choice. Unfortunately, some of our schools aren't where our schools need to be leveled up. Not all of a sudden folks can cherry pick where our children go to school. So for us, it's also not just playing offense with some of the initiatives that we want, but also defense on what can happen to us and impact us disparingly harder than other communities.
Outstanding. And even though I know tonight was the male conversation, to all the women who are watching and to all the women who are voting, your body is your property. So vote your body. If you can't think about anything else,
Right.
vote your body. Don't worry about the other things. Understand, for those women who don't have working uteruses, that impacts you just as well when it comes to in vitro. So, women, vote your body. Your body is your property. Congressman, take us home as always.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I am not all people, but I am one. I cannot do all things, but I can do some. That which I can do, I will do. And you should too. Thank you all. Have a good night. And we'll see you at the victory party.
Yes, sir.
That's right. That's right.
Right on.
Good night.
God bless
Good night.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. God
Good
bless.
night, everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. All right. Thank you, Congressman.